Morning, good evening, colleagues and partners. Welcome to the second session of the 2021 Cities on the Frontline Speaker Series, jointly organized by the Resilient Cities Network and the World Bank. My name is Uri Reich. I'm a senior urban specialist at the World Bank, working in the South and Eastern regions. The session today will focus on scaling up climate resilience, following up on Climate Adaptation Summit on the road to Glasgow. Before I hand off the microphone to Lorraine to introduce the speakers, I want to remind everyone of the intention and ground rules for the conversation today. The purpose of these global webinars is to have an open and honest learning conversation between practitioners in cities and governments and partners supporting those entities. The calls are not on the record, and we ask that you not attribute any comments made today or questions asked to the speakers unless the materials are made available after the call or you have the person's express permission to do so. We are thrilled at the response to the speaker series, and we have close to 350 people registered for the call today. To facilitate the discussion and as a matter of practicality, we ask that you use the Q&A function to post questions. We will also share some polling questions, and they will show up in your screen during the session, and we look forward for your responses. Thank you so much. Over to you, Lauren.
Thank you, Uri. It's with a sense of urgency that I introduce tonight's topic, scaling up climate resilience, from the Adaptation Summit to COP26 in Glasgow, and here's why. It's pretty obvious that the drastic measures that are needed to address mounting pressures to both meet greenhouse gas emissions targets or move towards net zero, mitigating climate change, as well as the measures that are needed to get serious about understanding climate risk and investing in resilience measures are delayed. And so what is required from governments at every level, and also the private sector in every nation, has to be a significant scaling of climate adaptation measures to avoid major economic damage and really terrible consequences for the most vulnerable communities. Just to give you a snapshot of the risks we are facing as urban communities, it's estimated that 1 billion people in coastal areas are going to be vulnerable to climate change impacts due to sea level rise, or 1 in every 8 people on the planet at risk. So the people you are going to hear from tonight are working to urgently scale up climate adaptation action. They are experts in their field, and they are working from some of the most vulnerable places around. First, we are going to have a presentation from Kamlesh Yagnik, who is the City of Surat's Chief Resilience Officer. Kamlesh has over 3 decades of experience in business and consulting and resilience. He started his journey because as president of the Southern Gujarat Chamber of Commerce and Industry, he represented small, medium, and large enterprises working in flood-prone areas. Kamlesh is a founder of Surat Climate Change Trust, which is the first of this kind of organization in India. And he's actively contributed to the Surat Solar City Plan and early warning systems for flooding of the Surat Municipal Corporation, among many other resilience building measures. We're really fortunate to have Kamlesh with us tonight. Kamlesh, over to you to start us off.
Just a minute. Okay, Lauren, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So thank you, everyone. And first and foremost is on behalf of City of Surat, I thank Global Resilience Network and World Bank for giving us an opportunity to share what is happening in Surat city and subsequently, what has been done till date with regard to climate resilience in the state of Gujarat. These are the two common statements which are spoken in India. They are uttered by father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi. He says that earth has enough resources to meet people's need, but will have never enough to satisfy people's greed. This way, we define the cause of climate change. And Mahatma Gandhi doesn't stop just by providing us with a problem. He also gives us a solution. And solution is, be the change which you want to see. Now with these two statements, I will start my journey, which will be, for next 8 to 10 minutes, sharing Surat's experience. Now Surat city, it is situated in the state of Gujarat. It is a coastal city on the Tapi river bank, having an area of about 326 square kilometers and close to about 6 million plus people are residing in this city. This city has the highest average family income, and this city was an erstwhile member of Asian Cities Climate Change Resilience Network. Then, Surat set up a Surat Climate Change Trust. We are a member of Government of India's initiative of Smart City. We worked, in a Rockefeller pioneered project of 100 resilient cities. Currently, this city is working with European Union's program of International Urban Cooperation with Global Covenant of Mayors. And during the course of this journey, we also set up a Covenant of Mayors for the state of Gujarat. We also actively work with GRCN, and recently our commissioner signed a joint declaration statement in Climate Adaptation Summit. Surat is the 8th largest city in India, and this city is an industrial town having 80% of the world's diamonds are cut and polished in this city, and 40 million meters of fabric is produced in this city. Now this resilience of the journey was shown in last two experience which we had, that was 1994 plague and historic flood in the year 2006. Now both these events, it brought out the resilience characteristic of this city. But challenges, what we have in the city are the per capita demand rise, it increases, per capita demand of infrastructure and all other resources. The major challenge, we have a multipurpose dam upstream. How do we manage this? And various departments in the cities were working in isolation. This was a major challenge. And this city has the highest migratory population growth. And how do we manage the immigrants, which come to city in search of livelihood and for their earning? So these are the major challenges as a city we had. But yes, like in the year 2011, for the first time under SN program, city earlier did not have an idea that whatever is happening to the city, we've had 25 notable floods in last 100 years, all were the result of climate change. But thanks to SN, we actually, got to know all the stakeholders in the city came together. And since then, we have been united, and Surat's first city resilience strategy was brought out in the year 2011. Subsequent to that, many reports, many studies were carried out. And then, we also worked in 100 Resilient Cities program, and Surat's urban resilience strategy was brought out. And currently, we are working, and we have just released a climate action plan for the city of Surat. Now, what are the main challenges? Apart from flood, we have extreme weather events, traffic, all so-called urban issues. We always, face it. So these are the main challenges, the main shocks and stresses of the city we have it. And what, in over a decade, we have learned. The lessons learned, the first and foremost lesson, we have learned is inequalities in the city. It makes the climate change much, much harmful. And yes, what are the challenges and what lessons we learn are, the exacerbate the vulnerability, equitable access to health, green urban future is possible. This is something, which we have learned over a year. And last year, 2020, it showed us the way to recovery is a green recovery, which will facilitate not only, from COVID, also from climate change. The accelerated digitization program, which is taking place in the city, it definitely will help in combating climate change. The water, sanitation, and waste collection and electricity, that is also managed in order to, insulate ourselves from the effect of climate change. Surat, generating close to about 2,000 tons of solid waste every day. Right now, we have taken a route to a circular economy, and today our waste, which goes to the landfill site, is reduced by almost 50%. These are, some of the lessons, which we have learned, over a period of time. And yes, we can now think, after carrying out various, innovative ideas, we can very well say that, we are capable of almost overnight transformation. City is changing over last 1 decade of experience, starting from SN to 100 resilient cities to IUC. This program, we can say that yes, we can transform ourselves. The major challenge, which we faced, we never collaborated earlier, and today at every opportunity, Surat City collaborates with local actors as well as, various international actors also. We have seen the power of community, because each community at city level, they have, decentralized actions, which takes place and ensures that, yes, it helps reducing climate change impact. There are many innovative ideas, we have introduced and we are implementing currently. These are, we have also in a process of developing our own multi-hazard resilience plan. So this particular plan is, we are redefining it. We have already had our urban strategy. Now, we are going for multi-hazard resilience plan. So these are some of the innovative solutions, city planned it. And yes, because, there were economic implications also. And this, we learned over a period of a decade. Now, in the year 2006, when we had flood-like situations, almost nearly 75% of the city was under inundations, under flood. We were driven by actual reality. Our response was reactive. And at that time, we had decided, sometime in the year of 2008 onwards, when we actually calculated the reason of flood and the loss arising out of the flood, we had decided that, by next 10 years, so that's, from 2008 to 2020, we will ensure that, we will be driven by forecasting. We will have a future scenario, and all our efforts will be in the direction of going from being reactive to being proactive. So in the earlier time, the major thrust was essentially on disaster mitigation response to disaster preparedness, based on current variability. Then, sometime during, after our SN program, we came, somewhere at a project level. At each project, we were ascertaining whether, it is climate friendly or not. And now for last, many years, we are essentially working towards mainstreaming resilience into sectoral policies and processes. So this is, over a period journey, we have had it. We cannot, and for that matter, it is very, very difficult to tell city that yes, a city is climate resilience. It's a journey which we have to continue carrying it out. So recently, we are working towards this, and Surat generated sufficient response, at a national and international level both. Surat, out of what all experience Surat had, Surat, wanted to share it with other neighboring cities. We are in the state of Gujarat, and in the state of Gujarat, when current Prime Minister was a Chief Minister of the state of Gujarat, he showed us a way, and that was a result of what we were doing. Some of the experiences of Surat were taken in this book. It's a compendium, it's a compilation of various projects which are carried out in various cities of state of Gujarat. So he gave a response, inconvenient truth. The response was a convenient action by state of Gujarat. And Gujarat was actually wanted to lead India by showcasing climate actions. That is, like going from darkness unto the light. And like many other countries in COP21, we signed a Paris Agreement and we decided to reduce our carbon emission intensity per unit of GDP by 33 to 35% from 2005 levels over 15 years. So by 2030, our idea was, and we wanted that 40% of our installed electricity capacity, it will be from non-fuel fuels. So this was a challenge, and a national action plan on climate change was already prepared and it was given to various states of the country. Now Gujarat also prepared a climate action, its own state action plan. Now what was interesting, and the state government, they liked the idea of Surat doing something in the area of resilience. And subsequently, we were taken, many round of discussions, carried out with state government, Department of Climate Change, various mayors and commissioners of various cities. And then, we were actually working on how do we ensure that, we go for clean energy and how do we combat climate change by introducing various climate action plans. So at that time, the experience of 100RC, it led us to join, because 100RC was a time-bound program. And during that particular period, sometime in the year 2018, European Union, joined hands with City of Surat. And Surat was the first city in the country to join a global network of a covenant of mayors. That particular network was first member city in the country. Now the experience, we wanted to share with our neighboring cities. We approached a state government, and after a lot of discussions over a period of time, state government decided that yes, we must have an alliance of cities and local governments of the state of Gujarat with a shared long-term vision of promoting and supporting voluntary action to combat climate change, moving forward towards a better, greener and resilient society. And this was a mandate, we all decided to adopt. The Surat city, took a lead. And right now, we are supporting other 7 cities in the state by supporting them, in calculating their GHG emissions, by identifying the target, carrying out risk and vulnerability assessment, and actually writing a climate action plan and energy access plan. And we don't stop here because there are frameworks available. We do have, India's own framework right now, is available, which is, developed by, wherein 100 resilient cities is, instrumental in developing this plan with the support of NIUA. So that is Climate Smart Cities Framework Assessment. So that also, we are undergoing all the 8 cities. And then, we design our own monitoring and verification process. So it is not only, the plan, subsequent actions are also defined. And then, yes, like support of finance options are also available to the city. So now many multilateral agencies are also supporting various cities in the state of Gujarat for implementing the climate action plan. Now, this was, like in sometime 2019, August, we launched a covenant of mayors of Gujarat, wherein all the 8 mayors and commissioners of the city, they for the first time, they joined, and under the leadership of our Deputy Chief Minister, this covenant was launched. Now, what exactly, we are doing at a state level? At a state level, under the leadership of Climate Change Department of Government of Gujarat, which is acting as a strategic knowledge provider, under the leadership and under the guidance of Government of Gujarat, Right now, we get a direct support from European Union, IUC, where do we get a technological, scientific, and methodological support is available. It's a common reporting framework which is used in order to write down various climate action plan for the cities. Now, these 8 cities of the Gujarat, they are planning and subsequently implementing and sharing their challenges and best practices among rest of the other 7 cities. So it's a great learning which cities get from each other. There's no need of reinventing the wheel, because most of the time, even though it's very, very difficult to adopt a solution taken by, say, Surat and give it to Vadodara city. But yes, we can tailor-made the solutions and the solutions can be implemented. So all the 8 cities of the Gujarat and the total populations, the total population of the state is about 60 million. And if we consider all the 8 cities, the population is almost half the state, close to about 30 million, are staying in the 8 cities of the state. And then, we have a city managers associations where not only these 8 cities, but even the smaller cities, they are also party to it. So now, it will further scale up from city, of Surat to 8 cities of the state of Gujarat to, will be going to the rest of the smaller cities in the state of Gujarat. So right now, they also join hands in this network, and we support them in creating awareness at the local level in a smaller cities. So with this, the state of Gujarat, with a shared long-term vision of promoting and supporting voluntary action to combat climate change and move to an inclusive, low-emission, resilient society. So that's what, will be an outcome. And today, with whatever support, we gave it, and we learned over a process that Gujarat government now, I can say that at the highest level of administration, it is committed to building a sustainable and a climate resilient future and enabling a low carbon pathway for Gujarat's economic growth. So this is where, we have reached, the journey which we started as a SN member, and today, we could reach, rest of the 7 big cities, wherein sharing our challenges, sharing our best practices. And the challenges, which we came across, the major challenge always was the data. Even, like in 100 Smart Cities program of Government of India, the challenge has been a data. But right now, with all the cities, if you see that, the recent data base of all the city services are in place now, and most of our cities have overcome the problem of collecting the data. So this is basically, in nutshell, I wanted to share about Surat and the journey which we have had over last 10 years or so. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kamlesh. Just listening to you is so inspiring. From 1 city to 8 cities, 60 million people who are going to be better protected and more climate resilient. I think you made a lot of good points around how collaboration and staying the course are so key, as well as continuing to develop better and better data to have a multi-hazard resilience plan. And it's incredible to see how you've shared those plans, those tools with neighbors, because we know that climate impacts do not stop at city boundaries. This is really essential. The next speakers who I'm very excited to introduce you to are Marissa Aho, who is the Chief Resilience Officer from the City of Houston, who's going to be discussing the Resilience 21 initiative in the U.S. that helps scale climate action under the Biden administration. So many of you will know Marissa, but just a quick intro. She is the Chief Resilience Officer for Mayor Sylvester Turner in Houston. She leads the city's resilience building efforts, including development and implementation of Living with Water Houston. And she has the rare honor of being the only double CRO in our network. She was also the Chief Resilience Officer for Mayor Eric Garcetti in Los Angeles in 2015. So she is a very experienced Chief Resilience Officer. She will be joined in this presentation by Resilient Cities Network's own Stuart Sarkozy-Banoczy, and he leads our partnership efforts and is a senior advisor for North America. So Marissa and Stuart, over to you.
Great, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, particularly morning for me. I'm really happy to be joining this conversation. And just to give you a little bit of context before we talk about the federal work, in 2015, when I started as an early Chief Resilience Officer, the way that I saw resilience was by scale. So that's why this conversation is so very important and dear to my heart. And Los Angeles' strategy was the first strategy that was designed by scale. And it was unique at the time, but a few years later, in Houston, we also developed a resilience strategy and launched it almost a year ago that was designed by scale. And the idea of this was always that if one of the scales wasn't resilient, then none of the scales were going to be resilient. And so Houston's strategy talks about prepared and thriving Houstonians, so doing resilience planning for people and how important that is, safe and equitable neighborhoods, recognizing that each neighborhood in any of our communities has different resilience priorities and they need to be lifted up at that neighborhood scale. Healthy and connected bayous, really looking at watersheds, and each watershed needs to be treated differently in terms of its resilience. Accessible and adaptive city, and that's about the municipality itself. And then innovative and integrated regions, knowing that the shocks and stresses don't know those municipal boundaries, and we have to work together with multiple municipalities, multiple governments, multiple scales to be able to get stuff done. Another way at the local level that we've been scaling up resilience is by the development of departmental resilience officer roles in every department in our municipality in order to be able to take on this work. So that gives you some context for what we're going to talk about moving forward, and that's that at the end of 2020, the North America CROs identified a clear opportunity to scale up resilience at the federal level. And we started talking about what important factors could go into that, and we started to bring in some very trusted partners using recommendations that then had been made in the past as a starting point to then begin a very rapid and expanding collaborative process to develop resilience and launch Resilience 21. And Stewart's going to give you all of those juicy details. Thank you.
Thanks, Marissa, and thank you, Lauren, and all the World Bank team and everyone else. Really glad to be able to share this today. There's a lot to dig into, and part of the reason that we were excited to do this is that for some time, Resilient Cities Network has sort of looked at the idea of scale on a continuum from the very project level all the way up to the global sharing ability of a network like ours. And so what Marissa has described began as something with the North American CROs and the conversations we were having about the opportunity, but because of that idea of our consistent sharing at a global level, everyone knew that we should be bringing in other people. And as she said, one of the things that was very unusual about this is that right at the holiday season, suddenly we had 50 plus resilience practitioners and experts, people that some of them we know well, other chief resilience officers, state level people, federal, across the board, sort of diving in, including those that were not in the United States and were sort of watching in on the process. And I'll talk a little bit about that because that gets to the scale that we hope to see from a lot of the actions that we're going to describe here. The best way to do this is to show you the document that became a website that these 50 plus people put together. And we also should make it clear, Marissa and I had a third facilitator in this process, and that was Lori Showman from Enterprise Partners, who the three of us really spent all the time with this 50 plus people and are continuing to do so. What's really important about the object of scale for this is that this is a public document. It's open. We we designed it to be owned by everyone. It certainly became owned by everyone, and it continues to be so. So part of what we're saying to you today is that this scaling is also open source. It's something that we're sharing with everyone. And so if you go to resilience21.org, the document is there. I want to share it for a moment because that actually gets us to the real core of what we were doing, because as we looked at how we best got this up and down that continuum, we decided the best way to do it after we gave it to the transition team for the Biden-Harris administration was to share it globally. And what we've heard is, and what we've seen, is that even the simple direction that we gave to people to highlight the actions in the document really started to spread around. And one of the really great bit of feedback, and it's only been a week that we've put this up and made it public, is that these actions, and there's 10 of them, have already gone out to cities, states, federal representatives globally who have said, hey, I took this action and I pulled it down, and I'm gonna bring it to our legislature. I'm adding this policy piece to our legislative team's work to go to the federal government and look at the way that the funding flows are going to be. One of the really interesting things about this process for us is we started with wanting to have just a set of recommendations. We got those. We got over 150. Now it's near 200. We haven't even published those yet. So what we did is we set up a pretty simple format. We've got 3 principles: lead, integrate, and accelerate. And these became values for this whole group. It's kind of amazing when you have 50 plus experts agreeing on what our definition of resilience is, how holistic and equitable we want it to be, and the direction of the values. And so it was set up under these three principles. The other thing that we did is, and you can find this all online, is we basically looked at it for 100 days. And now what we're trying to do is say what's happened in the first 10, 25, 50, etc. So this process hasn't ended. We in fact have a meeting tonight with the entire group, and that 50 has grown because we've added a LinkedIn group, and we've made this site public, and you can click up on the upper right and join the R21 group, and we've had people from all over the globe join the group. But basically, if you go to the site, one of the biggest pieces of scale for us is our very first action, which is that we're recommending a chief resilience officer be appointed at the federal level in the Biden-Harris administration, and that chief resilience officers are appointed inside each of the ministries or the agencies. And we've heard from colleagues globally that we are looking at doing this in our country or in our city or in our province or our state. So already we feel like the idea of scale, at least around these policy objectives, is really moving forward. So we do not have the time to even dig into a couple of these, but I want to note that any one of you can go to the site, pull down different pieces. We already know that they're starting to be embedded in other locations. And we'd love for you to join the R21 group. You can join the LinkedIn group. If time zones don't work on the times, we couldn't adjust it too much for the entire United States plus other locations. But as we look at rolling this out inside the country and at the federal level, it's also going right down to the project level and looking at agendas that are global in nature as well as super hyper local in nature. So please take some time and look through this. Each of the actions has a clear set of sub-bullets. And like I said, we're hoping to share the deeper set of recommendations that were made by the group, because those two will be good learning at a global level. And both Marissa and I and Lori, our third partner in this, welcome you to join us on this journey. So I'll stop there and we'll turn it over to Jorge.
Thanks, Stewart. Thanks, Marissa. And we'll come back to both of you during the Q&A. We're now going to turn it over to 2 additional people who are going to talk to us about the global action. So we've heard about 2 amazing national level initiatives, state level, national level, and now we're going to bring it to the global. So Jorge Gastelumendi is the Global Policy Director at the Atlantic Council's Adrienne Arsht-Rockefeller Foundation Resilience Center, and he is a climate and environmental policy leader and lawyer, and he's no stranger to this space. He was a chief advisor and negotiator for the government of Peru's climate negotiating team and was part of the team that helped with the adoption of the Paris Agreement. So Jorge, we're going to turn it over to you. We'll be followed by a great member of the network and Chief Resilience Officer from the City of Rotterdam, Arnoud Molenaar, who will be joining us. He is a member of our Global Steering Committee and works very closely with the Global Climate Adaptation Center, and he also leads resilience building efforts in the City of Rotterdam. So over to you, Jorge, and then to you, Arnoud.
Thanks, Lauren, and thanks to the Resilient Cities Network and the World Bank for this kind invitation. As Lauren said, the Paris Agreement was a cornerstone of the global action, and as part of that discussion, it became very clear throughout the process that non-state actors, including cities, needed a voice in the global process. So a parallel action track was created for non-state actors called the High-Level Climate Champions, which is a process in which non-state actors are invited to join a process in which they can elevate their voices for the work that they're doing on the ground, and bring some of their action agenda to the forefront of the climate negotiations. I wanted to share my screen if that is possible. I'll do that right away. There you go. And I'll be sharing this presentation with all of you, but I'll just be focusing on one slide for now. The High-Level Climate Champions have decided to launch recently a campaign called Race to Resilience. This is your opportunity, cities, as non-state actors, to raise your voices around the action that you're doing on resilience at the global level. As I said before, there's a parallel track to the climate negotiations that it's managed by governments, by sovereign states. So this is a process that will allow you to raise your voices. How we are thinking about this is through establishing a new aspirational goal. We'll see here at the bottom of the slide, which is by 2030, catalyze action by non-state actors such as you to build resilience of 4 billion people from vulnerable groups and communities to climate risk. This is a very ambitious goal. It's a 10-year goal, but we believe that with interventions such as the ones that you are doing in cities, which hold about 50% of the global population, we can get to that. Now, it's going to be a way in which we are changing the narrative around resilience. We're moving away from only focusing on risks to looking into opportunities, moving away from surviving to climate risks to thriving despite of them. And that thriving requires us to be better at identifying how our actions are creating impacts, positive impacts, and be able to measure those and make that transparent. So one of the challenges that we are putting to the global community as global champions for the Race to Resilience is that we're going to be asking people that join the campaign, this race, to indicate how their actions are going to be contributing towards reaching those 4 billion people. And that requires both an effort on methodological effort and metrics effort that it's ongoing at this point, and the champions are going to be convening. But also on the side of initiatives and organizations that are joining the campaign, an effort to track and report by COP26 and then beyond over the next 10 years, how they are contributing towards that aspirational goal. So we need to change the narrative around resilience. There is a lot of action happening on the ground. So what we need to do is now raise our voices in terms of the actions that we're doing, raise our voices as cities in terms of the needs that we have both financial and technical, that would allow us to join this global effort and will allow us to enhance our capacity to measure the positive impact that we're creating with our actions. And I will just share on the chat the link and the email to which you can access for getting more information on the Race to Resilience and how to join. I will just, put a final word on this is we are trying to do this at the scale necessary to mobilize actors to get to that goal. And for that, what we are inviting is initiatives that are bringing together, are convening organizations, individual organizations such as cities to be part of the campaign. So if you as a city want to be part of this campaign, what we are encouraging is for you to join initiatives that already exist, such as GCOM, the Global Covenant of Mayors, such as Resilient Cities Network, such as ECLACE, such as other networks of cities, to join those networks and through them mobilize their action towards this aspirational goal of 4 billion people. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. And we're very excited to be working together to mobilize cities towards the race to resilience. Arnoud, let me give you the floor and the microphone.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. I hope you can hear me clearly. And I hope that Nini can start my presentation. And while she is doing this, I think it's good also to try to link, the program that I will elaborate on with the race to resilience. Because I personally start to believe more and more that the 1,000 Cities Adapt Now global program can be an important building block of the race to resilience. So before we deep dive to the next slide, please, Nini, deep dive into the content, I think it's good to give you some context because this new global program to reach out to 1,000 cities and to accelerate adaptation in these cities did not came just out of the blue last Monday. It was not last Monday, but the Monday before, the 25th of January. It was a result of a process, you could say, that started in 2016, where the idea at the Adaptation Future Conference in Rotterdam had been launched to set up a global center on adaptation, including a related global commission on adaptation. And that commission had been installed for 2 years with the, you could say, assignment to come up with a program, a decade for the coming decade to accelerate and scale adaptation worldwide. And they launched that agenda on the summit on January the 25th. And part of this agenda is this 1,000 Cities Adapt Now program on the cities level. And the idea, of course, is that also to take this forward to the COP26. So let's go into the next slide, and where I want to explain who is behind this. And so it's the Global Center on Adaptation, obviously, but also the World Resources Institute, including the Resilient Cities Network and UN Habitat. This is, you would say, the core group. It's meant to grow. So these are just the initiators. And there are already several other partners on board, like the Dutch Ministry, Deltares, IHE in Delft, and many more. And so the idea is to let this also be a growing coalition, because you could say the overall message is that the activities on adaptation in cities is quite defragmented. And by joining forces between a lot of key players, we can bridge the gap, and we can work on a defragmented offer regarding the institutes, but also regarding content and regarding finances. And that's a way to speed up and to scale, you could say. In the next slide, I wanted to deep dive a little bit into the content. Not meant to read, but this is just a page of the joint statement, and underneath and the bottom of the slide, you see the link to that joint statement. If you Google joint statement 1,000 can, you will find several websites where you can download this joint statement. And you could say that the defragmented offer of this coalition is on four components. And the first one is that we are working on this platform, on this growing coalition. And when you look at the GCA and the WRI, they, I think, are really good, complementary to each other, working with resilient cities. That's a network, and UN Habitat also specialized on certain topics, for example, MBS. But this is just, again, this is the start. But what are we going to do, and how are we going to reach out to these cities? One by one, we want to help cities with a kind of a service package, you could say, to invest in transformative capacity building on two levels, both practical and both knowledge. And just an example of what we are doing at the GCA side, we are developing this so-called Cities Adaptation Accelerator, which is just, you could say, a bucket of tools that we can apply in cities from risk assessments to helping by training, for example, help cities to develop an overall adaptation strategy and adaptation and an action plan, but also with the project preparation facility stuff and monitoring. So from the whole range, that's something that we are developing, but also started to apply, for example, in Accra, in Ghana. And the other one is there is a big coalition of universities growing to also work on a knowledge component. And my dream is that, well, at least in the cities that we are going to work with, that these universities in these cities also join this movement. Then the solutions part, that's focusing on three components, very briefly, and that's MBS, because we strongly believe this is an important goal to work on resilience, and the Urban Water Resilience Initiative. That's where resilient cities, together with Deltares and WRI, are working on, for example. And last but certainly not least, also to focus on especially the vulnerable communities in those cities. And one example here is that we are working with a locally led action module and as a training together with SDI, the Slum Dweller International, C40 and Deltares in this case again. And then last but not least, it's also, of course, important to collect data about the progress in the cities, but also on the global level. So my final slide will show some next steps that we are taking, because so we are not starting from zero. Can I get the next slide, please, Nini? So because we do have you could say, I'm not sure if that's correct English, a flying start. We are already active in at least 100 cities, but it's good to now also focus on the synergy between the fragmented actions in these cities, but also continue to develop on the content of the program, of course. And that's, for example, on the side of the GCA, that's especially the Cities Adaptation Accelerator. We also have to start to select in which cities are we going to act on the ground. And for example, the coming weeks, we will, from the GCA side, come up with a selection of at least 10 cities in Africa. And that's the way how we want to work. And the scaling mechanism is also something that we have some great ideas about this, but it's also, I think something that will be worked out on the going while the plane is flying. So because one concept behind this is that the cities that we are going to help and work with on adaptation, it's important that the knowledge is scaled up via peer-to-peer solutions and using the water adaptation hub, for example, that has been set up recently and launched. Search for resources, of course, that will just also continue, and the expanding of the partnerships. And finally, it's important to, of course, shape a roadmap together. And I think especially again, this program can be an important building block of the race to resilience in our pathway to Glasgow. Thank you, Laura.
Very much to all of our presenters for this very excellent and inspiring presentations. There's certainly a number of very interesting initiatives for scaling up all these efforts. Let me just pick one question that came up in the chat, and that has to do a bit more with the financing. The question was trying to address how to really balance the fact that making investments in infrastructure may have, in the short term, may appear as being a little bit more costlier than other type of infrastructure, but in the long term, of course, the future benefits will end up paying off. So how do you see this balance between short term and long term investments in resilience investments? So this is open to whichever of you that want to take it on, please.
Yes, I fully agree. That's I think my first remark. I think in most of the cases, if you really develop your infrastructure in a smart way, maybe it doesn't even have to cost more, depending on the type of infrastructure. Are you going to include nature-based solutions or not? But maybe it will cost a little bit more, but on the midterm and even especially long term, it will be cheaper.
Thank you. No, anybody else would want to comment on this issue?
I think one of the things I would say, and this is not just an Resilience 21 or an R21 issue, and that is that we hope that some of the actions that are in there and those that people are adopting or adapting move money and do the holistic kind of conversations that we've seen in cities be really effective. So to the point that Arnaud was making and Jorge as well, as we race towards the resilience, as we move towards these actions, the holistic nature of budgets, whether they're city budgets or federal budgets, is really important. And so a lot of what you'll see in R21, but also in our general discussions globally, is how do we make sure that we're using the money more wisely? And so that if we're drawing down dollars from specific ministries or agencies, how do they, as a forward-looking piece of funding and financing for projects, have those co-benefits and resilience dividends wrapped in? Because that's a cost savings as well as a better use of financing and funding. But we need the private sector to join us too. And that's another large discussion on its own.
Sure, you mentioned co-benefits, which I think is one of the very important framing issues in project development. Let me give Marissa and Kamlesh another chance to do that. Otherwise, I'm going to ask another question to you.
Yeah, you may ask, like the next one, that's fine.
No worries. So what I wanted to ask specifically, and this is a question for Arnoud, for Marissa, for Kamlesh, when we talk about these big initiatives that are mobilizing resources, setting goals, what is most useful to cities? What tools, approaches, and really engagement points have you found most helpful to get the tools you need to really do the kind of place-based resilience, scale-based resilience that needs to happen in cities?
I'm happy to start. We had the conversation with a number of chief resilience officers yesterday, and I'm just going to be very clear. We need more funding for this work. So that is the first primary thing. But I think the second is really about learning with and from each other and being able to not reinvent and see what works somewhere and bring it into your context and make it work for you. But that's what this network, that's what all of this work, and bringing it to scale is really able to achieve, is that we're not starting from scratch. We're able to start from the best and make it better for our communities.
the best and making it better for your community. I see Kamlesh, you're coming off mute. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. See, as I said earlier, I'm talking in context of state of Gujarat, where all the neighboring cities currently they are sharing their best practices and challenges. Now the solutions or the project, I have it for one city. It gets so essentially the cost of the project, it does come down, when we go from city 1 to city 2. And we've had, many examples wherein, the city first. So what, we have done it with the support of, local government because they centralize everything. So a city of Surat is working in an area of water management. The city of Vadodara, is working in.
I think we may have lost the audio, Kamlesh, when you were talking about city-to-city collaboration. We are unfortunately nearly at time, though. So what we might have to do is share that response from Kamlesh in a summary in the notes. Before we wrap up, though, I did want to give a last opportunity to any of our speakers, if you'd like to share a final insight or anything else with the audience. Arnoud?
So, yeah, maybe a short remark from my side as answer of the previous question, actually. So I'm a strong believer of having, as a city, it's really crucial to have an overall adaptation strategy. And of course, it's very obvious, and you need maybe some funding to develop such a strategy. But with such a strategy in hand, you can, on the long term, also save money because some measures are urgent and some, well, you have some time, and then you can piggyback this and include this in the ongoing projects and development of your city, and to make the projects more adaptation inclusive. But it starts with a good strategy, and that's why we want to include this in the 1,000 Cities CAN program.
Maybe one final remark from my side is, as in anything in life, you have risks and you have opportunities. I think there's been a lot of work on the risks and how we can embed risks into planning, and that could create reduce costs or save costs down the road. But we need to also look into the opportunity side of the equation and see how, in this changing world, we need to start to do things in a different way, different business models, different way in which we plan, different way in which we do a stakeholder participation to planning. And all of that will come to a realization once we have more clarity in terms of how to measure the benefits of that. So a lot of the systemic issues we need to deal with resilience to enhance the financial flows or resilience is into looking into how everything that we do could be measured in terms of impact, both in people.
Jorge, I think that's a very powerful point to end on, that if we can have very clear strategies that present risks and opportunities together, that really helps us to mobilize funding, and that those strategies can actually leverage the best examples from around the world, not to reinvent, but take them, apply them. That's what will help us actually get to scale quickly. I think that's a very good message to end on. That's what we've been doing here with the network, with the Cities on the Frontline series, to keep bringing these practices together. The cities who you've seen present tonight, from Rotterdam, from Surat, from Houston, and also from Los Angeles before it, all have those strategies that they've worked on, and they're all available online as well. And so I would encourage folks to go look at them. They have very practical projects and investment approaches. The other piece of this, mobilizing funding, has to come from multiple actors, and Stewart alluded to this in his response. The private sector needs to be involved, and in fact, that will be the subject of our next Cities on the Frontline series. We will be back on the 18th of February with a presentation on how we transform private sector actions to catalyze resilience. So until then, I just want to say a huge thank you to our speakers tonight who gave really excellent presentations, practical presentations. And then for those who are celebrating the Lunar New Year, we wish you all a very, very happy, healthy holiday and all the best for the year of the ox ahead. We're looking forward to seeing you in 2 weeks' time. Take very good care. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Laura.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Everybody, thank you.